Well, hey there, Elevate friends and family. Mark Pomery here, welcoming you to this week's Elevate Church online experience. Absolutely fantastic to have you, and a special shout out to those of you joining us for the very first time. This week is going to be week 2 of our brand new series, God Is, God Does. So stick around. I'll be teaching, and you won't want to miss that. Hey, before we get to that, 2 things. Number 1, make sure if you haven't already, you subscribe to this channel, you like this video. And the second thing is, let's worship together. I'm thrilled to announce this week we have a brand new worship partner called Sanctus Real. They win fancy name of the day for sure. And they're going to be leading us in 2 songs, which may be familiar to you or may not be familiar to you. We'll see. But the words will be on the screen, and you can follow along from wherever you are.
Through every trial, through every circumstance, still your mercy covers me. Through every battle, I don't have to understand, still I lift my voice and sing. We sang today, tomorrow and forever, I will live for you. Today, tomorrow and forever, I will worship you. You have been faithful, you have been kind to me. You hold my future in your hands. So when the world's shaking, the ground beneath my feet, you're the solid rock on which I stand. I stand today, tomorrow and forever, I will live for you. Today, tomorrow and forever, I will worship you. I worship you on the mountain and the valley. I worship you in the calm and in the storm. Today, tomorrow and forever, I will worship you. Oh, I will worship you. Jesus, I worship you. Just ask the way if they are still at the mention of his name, and they'll say, my God is still the same. Ask the wolves if they still fall at the mighty sound of praise, and they'll say, my God is still the same. When did he break his promise? When did his kindness fail? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. When did he lose his power? When did his mercy change? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. Yeah, yeah. Oh, you're still the same. Just ask the word. You prayed in desperation if they're hurt, and they'll say, my God is still the same. Ask the grave if it's strong enough to keep hope in its chains. No. It'll say, God is still the same. Yeah. When did he break his promise? When did his kindness fail? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. When did he lose his power? When did his mercy change? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. No once did he ever stop moving. No once has he ever let go. No once did he ever stop proving our God is in control. No once did he ever stop moving. No once has he ever let go. No once did he ever stop proving our God is in control. When did he break his promise? When did his kindness fail? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. When did he lose his power? When did his mercy change? Never has, never will. My God is still the same. No once did he ever stop moving. No once has he ever let go. No once did he ever stop proving our God is in control. No once did he ever stop moving. No once has he ever let go. Never has, never will. My God is still the same. And never has, never will. My God is still the same. Never has, never will. My God is still the same.
So one of my favorite cities in the world is the beautiful city of Rome, the eternal city. And my wife and I, we've had the good fortune to go there on many occasions, which, by the way, before you get too impressed, my wife is full-blooded Italian and she has family scattered all across Italy, which means when we go there, it's free food and free accommodation. In fact, it's actually cheaper for us to spend 4 weeks in Italy than 4 weeks in Busselton here in Western Australia. So anyway, but Rome is one of these great cities of the world that never disappoints, that when you go there, it's even better than you imagine. There's even more things to see and do than you even dreamt possible. And, you know, for me, when I walk around Rome, it's like my jaw is dragging on the floor and I'm just looking like, wow, 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 incredible. And, you know, when I talk to people who are going to Rome for the first time, I'd say, listen, go to the big tourist attractions because they literally are the big tourist attractions because they're so incredible. You know, go to the Colosseum, suffer the lines. It doesn't matter. You know, go to the Trevi Fountain, go to the Vatican and the Sistine Chapel. And, you know, and look, when you go to Rome, there is an underground metropolitan system, but I tell people don't take that. Stay above ground and walk everywhere because as you walk, you see just things you would miss if you were going from metropolitan stop to metropolitan stop. And one of the things to remember while you're walking around Rome is you actually are walking on literally the same streets that Roman citizens and political leaders and emperors and soldiers, etc., have been walking on for thousands of years. And in fact, Rome make a point in the city to use the same construction materials and methods to build the surface of the roads. You know, they call them San Pietrini, which we kind of translate cobblestones, but they're very unique to the city of Rome. There's no trucks pouring hot mix and just putting like concrete roads down. Anyway, one of the times that we were there, Louisa, my wife, and I were, here's a photo. We're standing next to this ark. It's called the Ark of Titus. And yep, as you can see, just in the background is the Colosseum. And what you can't see is to the side of that is the Roman Forum, where the Roman senators met, where Julius Caesar was assassinated. There's just alongside that, the first ever literal multi-story shopping center in the world, just near that. And the list goes on. So we were standing next to the Ark of Titus, just like plotting our next move, overwhelmed for choices. What shall we see next? Where shall we go next? When out of nowhere, coming down a side street, we heard, well, one guy say to his travel companion, "These frickin' stones." Like he was kind of over walking on the stones. And Louisa and I just looked at each other, and look, to this day, which is kind of 20 years later, we still laugh about that. And actually, we use that as a little joke, private joke between us. Whenever we find ourselves in a great situation and yet start to have or demonstrate a bad attitude, the other one will say, listen, these frickin' stones, like, it's possible to be in a great place, a great situation, a great season of life, and yet still have a bad attitude. Now, I don't understand that guy travel halfway around the world complaining about the stones while you're 100 meters from the Colosseum. Okay, what an idiot. But I do understand the temptation to complain. You know, people didn't keep their word to you. There's a temptation to complain. You know, maybe you've been through some things. There's a temptation to complain. Someone betrayed you. There's a temptation to complain. But here's one thing I've learned about complaining. It almost never makes things better, and actually only makes you bitter. Now, last week we launched a brand new series called God Is, God Does. We're going to be teaching on 4 of the unique names that God revealed about himself that point to his nature and his character, and therefore point to what he has done, what he does do, and what he can do in the future for you, in you, and through you. So last week we talked about one of the names that God revealed about himself, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord or the God who provides. And you can get that on our podcast. If you missed it, you can listen to that. You can actually download our app and the podcast's there. Or if you like, you can go to your favorite podcast app and search Elevate Church Perth, and you'll find that message in there as well. I highly recommend it. All right. While you're in scanning mode, how about you scan this flow code? It's going to take you to Exodus chapter 15. Last week we were in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. This week we're in Exodus, the second book of the Bible. And while you're scanning that, let me just give you the scene. We're going to drop into a slice of history where God had delivered the Israelites from centuries of slavery in Egypt. He'd actually led them out of Egypt up until a point where they were kind of jammed up against the Red Sea, looking like there was no way to cross. There's 1 million of them, men, women, children. The Egyptian army was now in pursuit to try and get them back. The Pharaoh had changed his mind. And God parted the Red Sea, allowed the 1 million Israelites to go through. And then just as the Egyptian army arrived, God caused the water to close in on them and sweep them away and eliminated the threat. And look, as you could probably imagine, right then, this sparked the Israelites to start singing God's praises in a new way. However, the next 3 days, they were continuing their journey through the desert. They didn't find any source of water. So now we find them, and we're going to drop into where they had been moving through the desert for 3 days, in the desert for 3 days without water, but they finally now come across water, an oasis of water. And the author describes it this way: when they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter to drink. So they called the place Marah, which means bitter. 3 days without water, well, anywhere probably is kind of a problem, but 3 days without water in the desert is a big problem. So, fair to say the Israelites were now facing a literal emergency. Well, what did they do? Well, then the people complained. And they turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. So Moses cried out to the Lord for help. And the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. Now, I want to unpack a few things from just this slice of history. First of all, last week we came across Abraham and his use of the word worship, which was the first time we read the word worship in the Bible. Well, now we come across the word complain or complaining, and this is the first time we see the word complain in the Bible. And who are they complaining to or complaining about? The leader. So, turns out that's not a new thing. Been going a long time. But ultimately, whilst they were complaining to Moses about Moses, they were ultimately complaining about God and questioning his provision in their life. And we're going to see we're not going to see today. If you continue to read for yourself, you will see that they are recorded as complaining another 15 times. And remember, these are the people that God just did this phenomenal miracle of parting the Red Sea and allowing them to escape the pursuing Egyptian army. 3 days later, they're kind of losing the plot. So let me double click on 3 things. First of all, let's talk about this idea of complaining. The original Hebrew word is murmur, which we would describe as onomatopoeic. Like it sounds like it means like it sounds. Murmur, 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 murmur. How many of you know somebody at work, when they arrive for the day, it begins. Murmur, 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 murmur. How many of you have a friend like that? Maybe a family member like that. Maybe that's you when you're stuck in traffic. So first of all, there's this thing of complaining, and I'm going to come back to that in a second because there's a very cautionary tale that we need to understand when it comes to complaining. Secondly, they complained to Moses and kind of about Moses. They complained to Moses, and yet Moses then did what they could have done themselves. He just prayed to God for a solution. Like the people could have done that, but instead of praying to God, they complained to Moses. And while the Israelites were acting like a group of entitled brats, Moses was used by God to see the water turn from bitter to better. And I just want to flag, and we'll come back to this, God can do the same thing in your life. He can turn bitter to better if you turn to him. All right. Now, there's a third thing, the issue of the wood. So we've talked about complaining. We've had a look at the idea of praying to God instead of complaining to Moses. But really, when we're faced with these challenging circumstances, which we will be in life, we have a choice to make. Do we want to venture down the bitter path, or do we want to venture down the better path? Because venturing down the bitter path kind of looks like this. Yes, it starts with complaining. Something happens you don't like. Something happens you'd rather didn't happen. Somebody, disappointment, hurt, all the things. And you can choose to just, like default, start complaining about them. Well, let me warn you. God ultimately came down hard on the Israelites for their habit of complaining. You're like, why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they were ultimately calling into question God's goodness and God's provision. Now, when we start complaining, it actually strikes a root of bitterness in our hearts, which, as if we continue complaining and don't go to God, that root will grow deeper, and ultimately it will start producing fruit, but not the good sort of fruit. It will ultimately produce rotten fruit, bad fruit, bitter fruit. in our lives. And then ultimately, finally, it'll lead to rebellion. I mean, this word in the original Hebrew for bitter could actually be translated to rebel. This idea that you're questioning God's goodness. Why did God let this happen to me? God's obviously not doing his job. And we can start to harden our hearts and live out as bitter people. But there's a better path, and we can choose, instead of starting with complaining, we can choose to start with praying like Moses did. Make prayer your first response, not your last resort. And when your kids act out, pray for peace and self-restraint. When supermarket prices go up, pray for provision. When you're stuck in traffic, pray for patience. When people say bad things about you, pray for protection. When you're facing a seemingly impossible situation, pray for wisdom. When you feel like life's too much for you, pray to God's Holy Spirit for strength. Pray like Moses did, because God is good and God is powerful. Now, as you start to pray instead of complain, you'll start to see things differently. You'll start to see things in life as a blessing, and gratitude will start to become your default setting. Just today, let me tell you about how great my day has been so far and how grateful I am for my day so far. This morning, I woke up. So that's a good start. Beats the alternative. I woke up in a bed. That was pretty cool. I was grateful for that. This bed that I woke up in was in a room with walls and a roof over it. I was grateful for that. I then went up to turn on my coffee machine. I was grateful that I have a coffee machine. I used a flushing toilet. I'm not expecting you to over visualize that, but the point is there's a lot of people around the world don't have access to a flushing toilet. So I was grateful for that. I had a shower with clean, hot water. I was grateful for that. What an incredible day I was having, and it was only 7 a.m. My point is, when we start to look at things with gratitude, look at things that we might have gotten the habit of taking for granted, gratitude becomes our default setting, and we will start to live whole. We will start to live better, not bitter. Our personality type, what we become known for, our countenance becomes better, not bitter. Now, just quickly, the third thing in this little slice started with the Israelites complaining to Moses, Moses praying to God. The third thing was this piece of wood. And I just don't want you to miss this. The same Hebrew word that's used there for wood is the same Greek word that's used in the New Testament to describe the cross of Jesus. God used a piece of wood that Moses held onto to turn the water from bitter to better. He used a piece of wood that Jesus carried up a hill and was ultimately nailed to make it possible for your life and my life to be free from the bitterness of sin and death and to experience the better of grace, mercy, forgiveness, and freedom. All right. The writer continues, it was there at Merah, they call the place bitter, that the Lord set before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. Another test. We looked at one last week. God said, if, meaning like this is what I want you to do, if you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all of his decrees, then I will not make you suffer any of the diseases I sent the Egyptians. The 10 plagues makes COVID look like nothing. For, and this is where God reveals another name of himself, I am the Lord who heals you, which we translate, or the Hebrew translation, and we use this phrase, Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. And in revealing this name, God's revealing something specific about his nature, his character, and ultimately his ability and willingness to do things. He can reclaim what was lost. He can restore what was broken. He can return what the enemy has stolen, and he can bring new life to those areas in your life that feel dead. He can move you from a bitter place to a better place. But there's a clue right at the top. God says, if you do this, then I will do this. And the you, the me, the we, if we do this, is listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight. I would contend, and my experience in my own life and in leading people in the church space for over 30 years, is the more you listen and obey God, typically the less you suffer. Not that you won't suffer, but you will typically start to avoid unnecessary pain, self-inflicted wounds from poor choices, relational turmoil through unwise words and actions, a life limited by self-reliance. And here's the deal. You've probably noticed this. There's a lot of voices around us right now competing for our attention, and they're not all bad. But my pro tip is don't make any of them above the voice of God, because being healed from God often starts with hearing God. So let me finish with this. We're big fans of the Bible app. If you've got a smart device, smartphone, tablet, you can use the Bible app. It's free to download. And there's things like the verse of the day on the landing page. We're big fans of the Bible plans. And if you haven't already, you can scan this QR code. It'll take you to a section of the Bible app. Now, you have to first have downloaded, installed the Bible app. Once you've done that, scan this QR code. It'll take you to a section called My Church, where you can actually set Elevate Church as your church. And then every Monday, the beginning of each week, we post up a featured Bible plan linked to the topic that we've taught over the weekend. So after this goes live, depending on when you're tuning in, when you're joining in, there will be or be about to be a featured plan in that My Church section around the big and important revelation that God is Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. I do those plans. I get a lot out of them. Our team, our leaders, more and more people in our church, more and more people in our online community are taking advantage of this incredible free resource. So I encourage you to do that as well. All right. Look forward to continuing this series with you and having you join us for that. Hey, so that was week 2 of our series, God Is, God Does. And of course, you can watch this anywhere you obviously did just now. You can also listen. We record and preach this same message in our live experience here in Perth every Sunday. It's kind of a different dynamic in person. And we record the audio of that and we publish that to our podcast, which you can get on any of your favorite podcast platforms. Just search Elevate Church Perth and you'll find us there. Highly recommend that. 2 more things. Number 1, hey, if you haven't already, why not think about giving? Giving is just financially resourcing us in our mission to reach people and build people just like you, some of which we do here in our online community. All right, that's it for now. Next week, we'll be taking a little pause on our God Is, God Does series and having one of our teaching team teach a one-off message, a little sorbet to cleanse the palate. So be sure to join us for that. Think about inviting someone with you, maybe have a watch party, and we'll see you back next.